All right. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Looks like we got a great group of people as far as attendees. I know we have a great group of presenters here as well. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started if that's okay. Um, so I'll just introduce myself. My name is Antar Tichavakunda. I'm an associate professor of education at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And very relevant for this, I am an alumni. I don't know how it works. Alum of the Pullias Center at the University of Southern California. I don't know if anyone, Diane, I can just keep going, talk about the award, or if you want to say anything, I'm not sure. Um,
That's fine, Antar. Go ahead, take the lead.
got you. Cool. But yeah, so basically how this works, the Pullias Center, I just want to thank the Pullias Center, the Center for Higher Education at USC. What they have this really cool alumni award that helps fund the work of some of their alumni, right? And as an alum myself, they help fund some of this work that I'm doing that allows us to have this space. They funnel some of their resources here so we can have some of these really important conversations. I encourage you all to check out the Pullias website where you can see some of the reports, other webinars, and other research products that have come out of the Pullias Alumni Awards. I just want to start off in gratitude, thanking USC and the Pullias Center for their generous support. Um, with that being said, I want to just talk a little bit about what you all are here for. What is this, right? You didn't come to hear me talk. That would be a keynote. And that's not it. But basically, I wanted to get a group of scholars together to talk about what a green book for higher education could look like, right? And what do I mean by green book for higher education? First, we have to think about the green book. Encourage you all to look it up if you haven't heard of this idea of the Green Book. But basically, the Green Book was understood as almost the Bible for Black travel between like the early 1930s, I guess, and the 1960s. It was known as very important. It was the Negro Motorist Travel Guide, named after Victor Hugo Green, who created it collectively with Black communities across the nation. Why did Black folks need a travel guide? Because of to understand where Black folks could pay, like do their patronage, where they could sleep in hotels, where they could eat. Where would Black people be welcome in a Jim Crow, pre-civil rights America? So although the travel guide was a lot about where Black people could be, where they could travel in leisure and safety and enjoy and all that and enjoy this possibility of travel and navigation in the US, there was this subtext to the Green Book, right? The subtext that Black people were not welcome everywhere. Although the Green Book highlighted agency, the subtext was sundown towns. The subtext was there were towns with explicit signage, explicit symbols saying Black people or expletive slurs for Black people do not come here after dark, right? So that was the subtext for the Green Book. There were sundown towns. So right now, in this unique moment, politically tumultuous moment, I'm curious about how we could use the Green Book as an analytic for communities moving forward. How are universities in higher education in particular, how are universities, centers, streets, cities, states, however, signaling to Black people, to Black communities, to Black students that they are not welcome, right? And maybe they're welcome in certain statuses, but maybe not in others, right? Anyway, enough of me. Enough of me talking. We can talk more about the Green Book as well. And I'm really excited to just hear from our esteemed panelists. So with that, I would love if you all could introduce yourselves. You can just say who you are, where you work, what type of work you do in higher education. Yeah, just your research. We'll get into that, and then we'll get a little deeper into questions after that. I'm just going to call on people, if that's okay. Um, Dr. Brown, would you get us started?
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for kicking us off. I'm glad to be in community with you all. So I am Kayla Briscoe Brown. I'm an associate professor of adult and higher education at the University of Oklahoma. Um, Joining you all when Antar was talking about sundown towns. I was thinking about a conversation we were just having about a sundown town in Georgia. So the relevancy of what we're going to discuss today is really timely as we continuously navigate space and place as Black people. I primarily study issues of campus racial climate and hate crimes, particularly how it affects Black students, faculty, and staff, presidential responses to race and racism, and more frequently have been doing a lot of work nationally on issues of higher education politics and policy, particularly in the aftermath of our wave of legislation against CRT and DEI. So happy to be in community with you all. Happy to be on this amazing panel with so many brilliant minds and look forward to being in conversation with folks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Dr. Rawl, would you go next? Introduce yourself.
Sure, why not? You have to move slightly to, like, to the left or the right so everyone can see the nice placement of your book right behind you. So a little slight, pubbing your stuff. But good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. I am Raquel Rawl, an associate professor in education policy analysis and leadership, as well as an associate dean of strategic initiatives in the School of Education at UC Riverside. And I, for the last 10 years, have been interested in studying the same thing, and that's governing boards of higher education, leadership in higher education, decision makers, decision making, and the decisions that pan out in higher education, and particularly looking at the ways in which those decisions don't always work out for folks who don't look like the decision makers in higher education, and something I'm really passionate about and something that we see. And I often feel like I've been told y'all this was something that's really important because a lot of things can happen for the better or for the worse in higher education, but they can't be sustainable, right, without the inclusion of the board. And I think it's a really important and overlooked topic often, and it's gaining some traction, which I'm excited to see. But I still think we just don't know enough. We don't study enough. We don't talk enough about the role of the governing board. And obviously that changes depending on the state. That depends on the governor, right, and all these different things. And so there's variations on when the board can flex or not flex. But I think it is important in all places, in all systems, states, regardless of the institution type, that we pay attention more to boards of higher education. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rawl. Dr. Graves, would you go next? Introduce yourself.
Yes, I'd be honored to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be on this panel with amazing scholars that I'm a fan of their work. And so to be in conversation means a lot to me. My name is Devon Graves. I am an assistant professor at North Carolina State University in our College of Education in our Department of Educational Leadership Policy and Human Development. And I'm also a faculty scholar at our Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research. And I study how students of color, how communities of color navigate policies within higher education, particularly within the community college context. And financial aid has been an area that has been of interest to me to understand how these racialized policies impact the experiences for our students of color who need support to navigate this treacherous process of financial aid and the community college system that can be a positive experience for some students, but it also can be a barrier for some. So excited to talk more about this work and the idea of the Green Book. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graves. Dr. Smith, last but certainly not least, why don't you close us off with your introduction?
Thank you, Dr. Tichavakunda. And I thought I was here to operate the chat. I thought I was like, he got me last. Like, what's going on? No, congratulations, Dr. Tichavakunda, on your award. Thank you to the Pullias Center for having me and giving me an opportunity to join some great and esteemed colleagues in the field. I'm Everett Smith. I'm an associate professor of higher education at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm also a senior research fellow with the University of Cincinnati Foundation, where I'm doing philanthropic research around pro-social behavior of donors based on donor groups. I found some really interesting things I think can inform the field about how we engage with philanthropists to support the mission of colleges and universities. And we'll talk about in the context today how we can better support Black students through philanthropy. My research agenda centers around three themes: policy, governance, and finance. I've spent a lot of time studying philanthropy as a tangent of higher education finance in the 2-year and 4-year context. I recently received a Spencer grant to study tax policy and bond referendums for urban community colleges with a colleague at Iowa State. So very excited about that work and looking forward to sharing that more broadly with the field. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you all so much. And as you all can see, we have like just a dynamite group of folks here, leaders in their own right in various ways in the field. And what we really want to talk about the external forces shaping like Black communities' experiences in higher education. As we know, none of the things are, it's hard. You can't make a fine line between external and internal, but there's this theme of like policy, leadership, philanthropy, financial aid, all these things that seem kind of external to the student experience, but shape it, shape higher education in so many, in huge ways, right? So again, to say a little bit more about kind of like this whole Green Book idea, this Green Book as an analytic, one of my favorite scholars, and I promise I'm gonna stop talking. One of my favorite scholars is Derek Bell, right? And Derek Bell said, racism is here to stay. Now what, right? Or he said, another thing he said was like, we need to get real about racism. I think the Green Book in some ways is an answer to that. Okay, so if it's here to stay, if these forms of oppression are here to stay, right, what do we do? And I think a Green Book is a way of like collective agency, resistance, awareness of what is going on, right? Awareness of what is going on and our response to it. And today we're talking specifically about Black communities, right? But I think we could also use the Green Book as an analytic to other marginalized communities as well. So encourage everyone to just think about agency and how we exert our agency to these kind of perilous structures. So with that being said, I kind of want to just hear all of you all speak, if that's okay. And I'm gonna ask the first question, and I'll field it to all of you all. Then we'll get to more specific questions catered to your expertise. But yeah, first question. In a word, how would you describe the state of Black students in higher education at this moment, and why? I'm gonna put it in the chat for us too. So in a word, how would you describe the state of Black students in higher education at this moment and why? Um, so if anyone wants to jump in, or I can just.
I can go first. The word I think about is concerning. We've seen a lot of influx in state policy and state legislation, um, and over the past couple, really more than a couple of years now, but certainly we're seeing it in Ohio, and the state of Black students across the nation. I think it certainly varies institution to institution and institutional type, but nonetheless, how these policies and laws are being developed, curated, and quite frankly sold to the public, and the blind spots and the underlying tones and sometimes dog whistles that certainly don't lend themselves to the support of Black students is very concerning. And increasingly more, I think we'll see more states. I think we're close to 30, if not surpassed that now. More states are, according to the Chronicle Higher Ed, are introducing and implementing these state laws that really are impacting the way that public institutions operate. And from a philanthropic standpoint, put scholarshiping and the way we scholarship at risk. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So that would be the word I would probably say, use Dr. Tichavakunda. It's concerning.
Concerning, yeah, 100%. And thank you for that explanation as well. Dr. Brown, I see you off mute.
I think the first word that came to mind, very similar, was unsettling. And I think there's three specific things that really sit in the back of my mind right now. One being, no more than maybe 2 weeks ago, the consistent attacks that was going on within HBCUs, bomb threats, things like that. I'm a proud alum of the unsinkable Albany State University. I ride for HBCUs. So the thought that white supremacists are calling and asking to bomb Black students, that is unsettling to me. And we need to sit with that. What does that mean? And why is this happening in this moment? As well as the continual murdering and lynching, particularly of Black students. I think about the Black men from Delta State. My husband is from Mississippi. My previous role as a professor was at Mississippi State. So I'm constantly thinking about what it means safety-wise for Black students in this moment, with all of the political unsettledness and turmoil that's happening, how that has an effect on our students, faculty, and staff who live in these very white, violent environments. And then really just thinking about the ongoing turmoil when it comes to dismantling DEI multicultural centers on campus. There's no space in place across the nation really for Black students to be well, right? Getting rid of Black scholarships, getting rid of, some Black student organizations. So I would say unsettling, and I'll speak to that a little bit more as we continue to have a conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Yeah, think about unsettling, right? So we have concerning, unsettling. Dr. Rawl, what are you thinking?
I was gonna come in next anyway, but you know, I thought first like on guard, but then I was like, is that one word? Does a hyphen count? But then so watchful, I think is my word. And I say watchful because I think just as much as Dr. Brown was just talking about, like there's all this stuff, but then I also see these pockets of, this Black joy that you talk about in your work as well. Like there is all of it happening. I think the like through line, like this thread that is in all for all Black students and Black faculty and staff is that we're watchful because a lot of us know things like this have happened before. A lot of us know that it could get worse, even though we hope not, right? And so we're just keeping our eyes, one, on the prize of what we are doing, because a lot of us are using higher education for social mobility, right? And trying to move to and through to the next thing, understanding the sacrifices that folks before us have made to get us in these positions. And so that we have no choice but to thrive and to do something in the midst of all of these different things. And so I often think of us as doing things not in spite of the environment, but because of the environment. Like we have been kind of formed through the pressure that is in excellence is in our DNA, right? And so I think that that's a really important thing to understand. And so I think watchful because we're like, sometimes we see like, okay, they're focusing on this, but they may be coming over here, right? And so we're always on guard and always looking at to see what's happening next, and that watchfulness, we're using that to position ourselves, I think, to try to really be strategic in how do we make sure that we can still do this work? How do we make sure that, I've known students like, oh yeah, I'm studying African American studies, right? But I also gonna add this other thing to give me some protection just in case something happens with this. And so I think we're strategizing, right? And so I think we're really trying to make the most of everything that's happening right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wall. So, Dr. Ross, we heard watchfulness, right? Watchfulness in order to be strategic amongst a lot of other things about this vigilance. Dr. Graves, why don't you? I want to hear what you had to think in a word.
Yeah, my word for me is discouraging, and I've been discouraged because with what we're seeing in the policy sphere and the backlash, it all stems from anti-Blackness, and so it is targeted, and that is so discouraging for myself personally. But when I think about the students and the families that are navigating higher education, I can't help but think how discouraged they may feel, and the goal here is joy killing and spirit killing. And so this is targeted, it's upsetting, and these are tough times. And so trying to support folks and support students, support families to let them know that it'll be all right, that we can make it through this, is tough. And so it's definitely been a discouraging moment for myself as I watch the changes happening across this country and in states where dismantling diversity requirements and curriculum happen so quick when we know making curriculum changes take years. And so to see how fast these institutions went about implementing guidance from the Department of Ed and from governing boards was very, very discouraging and continues to be discouraging.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. So thinking discouraging, right? And just to recap, the words that these scholars chose: concerning, unsettling, watchful, discouraging, right? So in a word, we can't adopt a ostrich, kind of just putting its head in the ground kind of approach to this. Like we have to get real about what's happening. And if we see what's happening, like the removal of of all the removal of affirmative action, all these anti-DEI measures, which are, just cloaked as I would say Jim Crow logics, right? I mean, we have to be aware of what is going on and the state of like and what it means for Black communities in higher education. So I want to thank you all for uplifting that, and just for the attendees here, right? We have leading higher education scholars telling us, hey, something this is not okay. We cannot go about business as usual. In a word, in a phrase, I think. So thank you all for uplifting that. I do want to talk about the Green Book in particular, right? I do want to talk about the Green Book in particular, selfishly, and have you all think with this idea. And we'll have questions at the end, just so you all know. We're going to have a Q&A period, just in case anyone has any questions. But so think about the Green Book in particular, right? The Green Book was necessary for travel for Black folks. I want you all to think about how we can use the Green Book is necessary for Black travel, especially in the pre-civil rights era. I want to be clear about that. I want you all to think about how we can use the Green Book as an analytic or approach to higher education for Black students or communities. What do you think about this idea? Is it extra? Is it needed? Is this an impossible dream? Is it problematic? What do you all think about using the Green Book as an analytic?
I'll go first on that. And so I don't think it's extra. I think it's needed, but things like this, I often wonder, like, do some of us not already have this, but it's clandestine and we don't want to put it out there for people, right? And so do I think we need one that is open facing to give folks the secrets of what we do and don't do? Because many people do this, and it's not just Black folks who do this, right? Everyone does this. Rich folks do this and pass the secrets down on what you do and don't do. But I think it's important for us to have a semblance of this, whether informal or formal. It'd be great if it was formalized in some way, because I always often think about the students, even the faculty and staff who don't have that, who somehow missed being under the wings of someone to say, okay, this is what you do. This is the professor you talk to. No, don't take this one because they're not about that life, that sort of thing. And so I think this idea of this strategy, this playbook, this green book is really important. And I think, like I said, many of us do it. It's just how do we make sure that it's not then tried to be used against us, right? How do we make sure that people have access to it and the right folks have access to it? And then how do we make sure that we get the right people involved, right? Some of the things, we talk about your book that's going to be coming out, all these different things, is that not everybody who needs to be about student success is about student success, right? Like, not all the people who we need to be positioned in places that could really help us are not willing to help. And so how do we deal with those things, right? How do we avoid? And then, we think about, and then I'll pass it on, but why is this necessary? It's a shame that it has to still be necessary in times like this. And so it's like, is this necessary, or do we just need to make sure that folks hold folks accountable for what they're supposed to be doing? And when they're a racist, anti-Black, all these different things, like, if we could fix this, then will we need this in the same way, right? And that sort of thing. So needed, yes, right? I don't know if that's an informal or a formal thing. What did you say? Extra? No, it's not extra. And so yeah, I mean, I'm about it. I think it's great, and I think you have a great analogy that you're using, and the reference point in making something that was really life or death back in the day, right? And now people may not think it's the same life or death, but in a lot of different ways, when we're setting our students up to come out with debt, to not be exposed to the right topic, all these different things, when we're making them feel like they are not great because they're learning about everybody else and not themselves, and that is life or death, because that stress, they talk about, like, the trauma of racism is a big thing too. It has health implications and all these different things. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wall. That's such a interesting point, right? About the formality or informality of it, how these things or resources can be surveilled. And this is the very real realities and outcomes and experiences that it is or can be life or death. So yeah, thank you for all of that. Yeah, who would like to chime in next about this idea of a green book as a metaphor?
So I just want to echo what I'm hearing from my good Sora. I do agree it is needed. I don't think it's extra, but I also believe where everything is being weaponized right now, curriculum, syllabized, this moment warrants a little safety too, right? Like, can we have a Black church moment where we all come together and talk about some of the formal and informal things that need to happen in this moment too. So I do think it's necessary, but how do we put that out? And then also, is there some closed caption conversations that we have amongst the Black community to have some of these strategies be implemented, right? Do we safeguard each other in this moment? I think about, many of us who have, on or have been through the tenure track process, people have uplifted us, right? How are we uplifting other people, other generations of scholars, other generations of students in this moment? So I like the idea, I rock with your work. So I like the idea and I do think it's needed. I also want us to be cautious in this moment of how we unpack some of these things and what we say.
So I appreciate this theme of safety, right? Safety not only for Black communities in higher education, but safety and like protection and being cautious about the resources that we create. So it can't be weaponized or used against us, right? So what does it look like for us to have internal conversations? And think again with Dr. Rawl, Dr. Brown are kind of in my mind, kind of thinking about like just almost like a hidden curriculum. How can we keep it hidden, but not for the folks who will use it in a useful way, right? Yeah, who would like to, Dr. Graves? I see.
Yeah, I can start off. For me, I think it is necessary. I agree 100%, and it's bold. And I think there is challenges that come with that boldness. And one of the biggest challenges I see is just the shifting landscape, and it seems so constant, and it's at so many levels, as my colleagues have noted, whether it's at the faculty level, whether it's at a department, a college, a university, or just in general, higher education is a landscape that our students and families are navigating. And so with that Green Book, it's who's up to the task of continuing to update and keep folks informed about these changes and what it means specifically for Black families, and how do we continue to stay ahead of the curve when, again, these changes are anti-Black in nature. And so that's what stands out to me of how do we keep up with those changes, and how do we make sure that we are ahead of the curve so that folks can be successful as they navigate these spaces.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graves. Think about how do we say, yeah, I love what you're saying about staying ahead of the curve, right? And I'm thinking what Dr. Rawl was saying earlier about this kind of watchfulness, this vigilance or this vigilant posture that we have to take. And then at the beginning, he said this boldness. At the end of the day, I agree. I think we have to be bold in our efforts. Like, I don't know if everything can be, if we're I don't know if everything can be kind of subtle, right? So what does it mean for us to be bold, to be courageous in this moment, while also understanding that, our livelihoods matter, right? Not everyone can be Derek Bell and quit their jobs, when there's something racist that's happening. So with that, Dr. Smith, would you like to close us out with your thoughts about the Green Book?
Thank you. I would just say that, and maybe this is comprehensive of everyone's comments, that I believe the Green Book can be useful in a lot of ways, particularly as a tool for not only for students, Black students, but for Black faculty and administrators to work through public policy that curtails the advancement of Black people, and figuring out, do we go left or we go right? And maybe it's not always so simplistic as that of taking a left or right turn. We recognize it's complicated. Public policy is complicated and it's messy, and it's being made in ways that don't necessarily support Black students. And we have to pay attention to the ways in which that's occurring. And this is where the Green Book can be really helpful to help mitigate some of the harm that some of these policies and laws can potentially cause for Black students and professionals on college university campuses. So I would look at it as a very helpful, useful tool, something to refer to when thinking about strategy. Dr. Rawl mentioned strategy, and I think that's maybe a key word here, being strategic. And being mindful in that strategy of not just simply engaging in, say, peers politics and things like that, but how do we have tangible results that's reflective of success? And I think the Green Book could help us not only think about how we do that, but could be a practical guide for many to implement change and to work through change as it's occurring and out of our control, out of our span of control.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And again, this theme of strategy, being strategic and intentional, so we can get real results, or results. Maybe it's not results. Maybe it's just so we are not harmed, as you mentioned, right? The curtailment of harm, or so we can be safe. So I think another thing that I'm hearing, right, that I think is in line with the Green Book is us thinking about how, like, harm reduction. Where can we be safe? Where can we be free? Where can we live these dignified lives as well? And to do so, it's not always the symbolic gestures, it's very practical gestures. And it may not be, sometimes we need the bold, and in making a policy stance, that oftentimes is bold, right? But yeah, just I appreciate all the nuances you all are bringing forth. I want to be mindful of time as I really want to hear, let you all kind of nerd out, if you will, like about your expertise and y'all like that, your expertise in relation to the Green Book. So I'm gonna have specific questions for each of you all. And yeah, I'm gonna kind of kick us off with Dr. Briscoe Brown. I'm gonna yeah, ask this question and you can kind of sound off. If you don't like the question, you can say, actually, I don't like that. I'm gonna talk about this. It's all good. Um, so, Dr. Brown, teaching in higher education is increasingly politicized and surveilled, especially in relation to anything related to race in general or Blackness. What role do these anti-DEI policies and measures have on curriculum and Black students' learning experiences? Is there anything teachers or students can do to resist anti-DEI or anti-CRT measures?
Yeah, and so I know this is affecting everyone nationwide, right, in different capacities, right? We see the vast difference between blue states, conservative red states, right, where many red states are literally having to up in arms their curriculum, their programs. They are changing course titles, course outcomes, syllabi. They're actively responding to anti-DEI, anti-CRT measures that are disbanding ideas of race, gender, sexuality, DEI, all things, right? I think particularly when I think of Black individuals, I think about how at one point, right, all of us were teaching CRT, right? We were teaching classes about Black people's experiences. We were teaching courses about, you know, some of the anti-Blackness, gendered racism that exists, right? Many of us can no longer teach those classes at our institutions, right? And the few that still exist, I think of very pointed environments that they can teach this, right? And I think it's wild, like utterly wild. A couple of days ago, I did a guest lecture for a friend at the University of Buffalo talking about race, racism, and racialized incidents. He wanted to come into my college student development class and talk about student activism. He can't talk about that here, right? So the nuance of being in different states and what learning will look like and what it won't look like, that's a problem. That's a problem that needs to be discussed, that we are really dwindling our curriculum, the accessibility of what students should knowledge-wise will gain. Um, and particularly Black students who already don't have space and place at a lot of these institutions, right? Like when I think of a hopeful moment, as I look across the College of Education, I see more Black faces than ever before, right? That's a mindset of hope, but I also think about they can't learn about race, racism. They can't learn about what it means to be Black and have Black racial identities. They can't learn any of these things in these spaces because this very moment, we're having to take everything out. And it's mandates happening not just on the state level, which is what we were going through some of the waves of the anti-CRT. Now it's affected on a federal level, right? And what does that mean to even try to resist in this moment when you are told you have no academic freedom as a faculty member? The protections that were once in place aren't afforded, whether you are tenured or not. Because again, some of the unimaginable things that are happening, they're getting tenured faculty out of these positions too in this moment, right? So if you resist, your livelihood, your well-being may be on the line, right? Versus a couple of years ago, I know lots of us were like, oh no, we're gonna teach CRT, we're gonna teach truth, but then they started firing staff members, right? Then they started dismantling whole cultural centers. And when we think of who's affected the most, it's really Black and brown people, particularly Black people, that sit within these units. So I think it's hard. It's not to say that we should not resist, but what are the ways that we resist in a safe way for our own well-being, right? Like, can I teach my Black students about Blackness outside of the curriculum and classroom spaces where I am no longer allowed to do this? Can I still show up and support them? Take them to coffee, take them out to dinner, talk to them about what it means to be Black in Oklahoma. Like, there are other ways that we're going to have to do this in this moment to sustain. Because I'll close, I'm the only Black faculty member in the whole College of Education right now. So every time I'm walking around, the Black students high-fiving me, hugging me, talking to me, running up to me. And that's Black joy that gives me love and peace, but I'm the only one. So most of them don't have me as a professor. So that if I go rogue, as they like to label it now, which is not going rogue, right? Then if I'm not in space and place, they literally have no one. So I think it's the consequences of in this moment, depending on the state that you're in. I do think states that have more flexibility should continue to do this work. I think as long as you can fight, right? I look at the iterations, right? So Oklahoma was a state where we hadn't adopted this in academic settings. So I was working with our deans and department chairs to push back, like, hey, let's not switch things. Let's not make these changes, right? So, don't over comply. Until you are made to do those things. But I think we're in a state right now, we will continuously see this throughout this academic year where we're going to be forced to do some things. And it's going to make us feel uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable with the changes that are happening at a national level right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. That was mic drop, and I just, for everyone to know, like Dr. Briscoe Brown's a leading expert on this. She's, her and one of her colleagues, Dr. Jones, have amassed a study talking with, dozens of, not more, like, of faculty across the nation, thinking about how they deal with anti-DEI, anti-CRT structures. So you're hearing from a leading expert right now. So if she's worried that to this extent, we should all be worried, right? And one of the things I do want to kind of uplift as well is thinking about like the labor that potentially falls upon the burden that falls upon Black faculty or faculty in general who are doing this work, and how we might have to think outside of the institution as ways of supporting students and communities, right? What can we do out? But again, think about labor there too. So thank you for
one more point real quick. And I would also say there's a lot of us who have been doing this work. And to your point, myself and Dr. Veronica Jones, she's at the University of North Texas, one of my good friends, scholar sisters. We were afforded a Spencer a couple of years ago to really dig into faculty's experiences and look at legislative bans against CRT. But there's a lot of us who have been talking about this, right? Doing this work. There's a special issues that's coming out with the Journal of Higher Education. So look into some of these experiences, read some of this work around these topics to see how people have been addressing this through leadership, through staff, through students' experiences. And I think that'll give you a glimpse of how toxic this moment is and how people have been trying to push back, right? I think that's important too, because right now we're documenting this moment. We're doing this work in a very violent stance, but there is some waves of resistance that are happening that I think some of us write about that might also be helpful.
Thank you so much for that, and just uplifting your work. And God forbid I task a Black woman with more work. But if you don't mind, would you why don't you share one of your links in the chat to everyone? Like some of your work, just in case folks are curious. With that, Dr. Graves, I want to pivot towards you and ask you a question. So about financial aid. Financial aid, especially in this economy, is critical. Eggs are $6. How can universities make financial aid as a system more equitable and responsive to Black students' needs? Understanding that Black people exist across class lines, right? But what, if anything, should Black families look for or tell their children about interacting with financial aid?
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, eggs are too high, so we need to address that as well. But for me, financial aid is important, and it is important particularly for Black students and families. Upwards of 80% of Black students receive a Pell Grant. So that's the highest of any racial ethnic group. And it shows that financial aid matters and is in fact racialized. And so knowing that financial aid is racialized, especially a federal program like the Pell Grant program, universities and colleges have to recognize this fact and be proactive with building relationships with Black communities, programs and services to support their journeys through higher education, particularly when it relates to navigating financial aid, which is a cumbersome and burdensome process. And support has to exist through the entire process. That's when students and families first learn about financial aid. You know, our institutions have to be proactive to engage families as in students as young as possible. And there's research pointing to K-12, you know, and when students are in middle school talking about the cost of college and the financial aid process, that universities and colleges take shape in these conversations and that they talk about the cost of college and of course the net price of college. And any of my financial aid nerds that are here attending, they know net price is what students and families are actually going to pay for college. That looks different and it's across individuals. And then when we further think about this, institutions have to think about the financial aid process, not just the application. As folks who've been following this issue, there was a FAFSA blunder during the Biden administration that caused a lot of issues. The Department of Education just released the new FAFSA for the upcoming year. And so progress has been made there, but there's so much more to financial aid than just an application. There is income verification, there are disbursement policies, and there are satisfactory academic policies that students must adhere to. And my work talks about how all of these policies are racialized and how it's students of color that encounter difficulties in this process. And why does focusing on this now more than ever matter? It's because the Trump administration is spewing rhetoric about financial financial aid recipients being fraudsters, that they're conducting fraud against the institution, that they're Pell runners, they're ghost students, they're online bots, getting this financial aid and leaving the institution. Now, don't get me wrong, fraud takes place, but is not as widespread and problematic, especially for the students who actually need financial aid. And so we got to be realistic about financial aid is racialized and that right now the political climate is going to make it difficult for students and families to navigate this process. And unfortunately, there are going to be institutions, particularly financial aid offices, that are emboldened to put in more litmus tests and bureaucratic processes to make students actually prove that they need this aid. So we got to understand that, and we got to start these conversations sooner, and we got to provide support throughout the entirety of the process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graves. I heard a lot of good things, like providing that support early, right? Having those conversations earlier, being real about the realities of what's going on. You listed a couple statistics about like, yeah, Black people will be disproportionately affected by these financial aid policies, given the high proportion of Black students who qualify and receive Pell Grants. So these financial aid, you know, is going to shape us in a lot of ways. So I hear you kind of on like the family perspective, making ourselves aware of what's going on earlier, understand there's going to be some hurdles that they're going to pass. And for the university standpoint, what can they do to support people throughout, and high school, what can they do to support people throughout the process? Because it's not just an application, it's something else that we need to be aware of. And Dr. Graves, again, has some really important work about financial aid, the intersection between race and financial aid. I'm not sure how public it is, but he has a project coming out soon that will be a very long text about financial aid. So be looking out for that, you know. So next, I want to hear from Dr. Rawl. Dr. Rawl, you know, her expertise has been about boards. She was talking about boards before I think anyone else was, honestly. I mean, I was like, were you on a board, Dr. Rawl, already as a doctoral student? But Dr. Rawl, what should leaders be doing right now to protect and support Black students? Again, saying this as, you know, you are also a leader in your university as well, right? You have a position yourself, a leadership position. So what would you like to see leaders, boards in particular, presidents, et cetera, doing to flex their power?
You know, I thought about this, and just in listening to my colleagues, one of the things I think is really important, and we don't say this enough, is to leverage experts, right? Like oftentimes we aren't an expert in everything, and that's okay. And that's why we have, you know, I love the way former USC President Sample talks about having these lieutenants, whatever you're weak in, you get the best lieutenant you can, right? That's the point. So we're supposed to be able to leverage these folks. We don't just hire people to work with us that don't know anything, right? And I don't think we do a great job of that as leaders as a whole. And I've seen that. I've been in far too many rooms where people think that they know all the answers, or they don't want to defer and ask someone before they make a decision, which I think is silly, understanding the gravity of some of the decisions that they make, particularly for boards, right, that have these lasting implications for what's happening. But I think the biggest thing is to look to the mission. This is what I'm telling boards all the time. It's like, this is one of their key core responsibilities, is to look to the mission of your institution. Most missions still, even though they've changed words, all these different things, care about access and opportunities for students. They care about student success and all these different things. And if you care about those things, all of your decisions need to align with that. All of your resources that you're funding out need to align with that. Your hiring needs to align with that. A lot of what we're doing in higher education does not align with those goals. And so I'm constantly telling people to go back to the mission, go back to your job responsibility of what you're supposed to do. We're doing this Pullias webinar. And so shout out to Bill Tierney. We took a class with him, first year PhD program, Stanley Fish's Save the World in Your Own Time. And I'm quoting something all the time from that, but something that was so profound in that book to me, when he talks about do your job, don't do anyone else's job, and don't let anyone else do your job. And if we did these three things, we would be great. And I see that so much. Like, we have this mission creep where we want to go do this job. Like, let me go do financial aid, right? Like, Dr. Grace doesn't know about that. Let me go do this, and let me talk about this. Let me go do the board. Let me go do all these different things. But I think we have to do what we're meant to do. Like, we have to stay in our lane. We have to stay in our role. And we've seen too many times when boards, and we talk about flex, and they flexed when they weren't supposed to flex. All of a sudden, it's typically in their purview, but they haven't used it, right? When presidents haven't done the things that they were supposed to do, right? And so we see all these different things happening. And because we don't have the accountability in the same ways that we have for some, right? We do have some presidents that we hold accountable pretty quickly, right? Like, we've seen how that has happened in the past. You think about Harvard, right? And all these different places. And other times people are given a really long leash to do all sorts of things. And so I think that is a really important piece, like, to really fulfill the role. And what does the mission mean for me in my job and my role? And how do we hold folks accountable for those different things? And how are we, even in our hiring practices, right? I know we have colleagues that talk about the hiring practices. How do we, even in that, make sure that we're getting the people who are about that mission, right? You can't expect to get people who are about the mission if you didn't ask them beforehand, right? If you're not looking for these key pieces. I think that's really important. And I think the other thing leaders need to be doing right now is to guard institutional independence with their life. It needs to be guarded fiercely. It's such a shame to me that we have forgotten the Dartmouth case. We have forgotten the purpose of all of the things in higher education. We are not meant to bend and yield with the wind in the same ways these other factors are, which is why we've had this separation for so long, and the ways in which the current administration has been able to really try to get people to beg and forget what they're for, and then to succumb for all of these different things. I think that is such a tragedy, right, in what's happening right now. But we have to do it together, right? Like, we can't just expect one institution to be able to step up forever. Everyone has to be on board. When one wields, the others will have nothing to stand on. And so I think there has to be precedent for that. And so I think it really has to be, if I summed up everything I said, we have to be collaborative. We have to be collaborative and let people do what they do. The analogy I'm always giving people is that you don't want 5 Shaqs on your team. Shaq is great, but you only need one, right? Like, you have to diversify and make sure that you build the best squad that you can build. And so it's really important. And I think Shaq would agree with that, right? Like, you only need one. And so I think that's really important for folks to understand, and take that analogy as you will in your particular institution or whatever, but you have to build the best team that you can, that has the expertise that will really make you strong and to really protect you from what you're supposed to do. And so if you have the mission to keep the main thing, I think that is all that you can do and ask for of these leaders. But because they have all these external pressures that are causing them to push and bend in ways that they haven't before, I'm really encouraging leaders to remember what your job is, remember what the mission is. Nothing should be able to change that, no matter what, right? It's turbulent waters, but you have to keep your eye on due north, right? That's the thing, right? I think people do. But yeah, so much, but be better. I think that's what leaders need to do, be better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rawl. You can't have 5 Shaqs. That's wow. Yeah, no, that's a bar. And I appreciate what you're saying. Like, let's remember our mission, right? Whether it's strategic mission of a department or whether it's your own mission, right? As faculty. I love what you said about not trying to step on other people's toes, or trust expertise, right? Expertise in work, expertise in scholarship. Thank you just for all that. I mean, and Dr. Rawl, like I said, is a leading expert on boards. Her and her colleague, Dr. Morgan, actually are starting a center. Have already. Could you tell us really briefly about the center, or maybe included a link to the chat about some of your work about helping boards and helping folks in higher education think through boards and governance? Yeah.
Sure, I'll put the link in the chat. Virtual Center, co-housed by UC Riverside and University of Michigan, where we provide resources for scholars of boards, board members, everybody. And it's sort of a place where we know a lot, but we know we also don't know everything. So we're also showcasing other people's work and putting links to kind of get people to where they need. It's sort of I think of it as, I've been talking to funders and things about like the Google of higher ed boards, that sort of thing. So you Google it and try to and go there and try to find all the other things, and you go forth from there with whatever works for you and that sort of thing. So thanks for the plug, but yeah, I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Rawl. Dr. Smith, yeah, thank you so much again for being here. Dr. Smith is working with the UC Foundation and studying philanthropy as well, right? So really excited to hear Dr. Smith talk about some of this. So tell us about how to think about the role of philanthropy in Black student success, especially at this moment. How should universities be treating philanthropy for racial justice? And how can potential givers or donors usefully make their funds work for the betterment of Black student life?
Oh no, it's a good question, and I appreciate it. I think the kind of way I'm going to respond to this is I'm going to try to be practical, for the sake of the audience and for those philanthropists who are, you don't have to give $1 million to be a philanthropist, right? So many of us are. If you've given $10, $5, you're in that category. So I think I want to offer some kind of practical advice for Black donors and higher ed professionals. And I'm going to answer your question with, the latter, especially the latter part of your question about what universities should be doing by talking about what they're doing. Because I'm really interested in how colleges, universities, public colleges, universities respond to public policy issues, right? And I look at what's going on with, like here, SB1 and other House bills across state bills across the country, that blind spot, what this means for the philanthropist, for the donor, right? And we're focused on a lot. It's been a big focus on curriculum, right? And what you can do in student affairs and enrollment management in those places. But we've got a lot of folks who want to give a lot of money to the institutions, and you got folks who want to give for the support of Black students, right? And that's okay. That's okay. If you I'm studying this obviously in a 4-year context, but I've done a lot of work in a 2-year context, and I completed a study about 1.5 years ago now that focused on diversity and DEI in the community college space, and we did find in that study that individuals who came from what we would probably say are historically underrepresented, historically marginalized backgrounds who had an interest in this tended to prioritize this in their philanthropic work, right? And so that message is people seeing themselves in their work, and they understand, in this case, what fundraising and philanthropy can do, the positive that it can do for community college students. And we've seen more Black and Hispanic students over the past 20 years go to community college. Community colleges obviously have an open access mission, and so philanthropy in that way is still very important. But in the practical way, I think about philanthropy, and you're thinking about, if you're thinking about giving, think about it kind of like this. You're going and thinking, and on a parallel, it's a little bit with the Green Book. You can tell me if this works for you, Dr. Tichavakunda. But I think about you're driving on the road. You know where you're going. You generally know who you plan to engage with. Those type of things, right? But you stop, right? Maybe to get gas, maybe to eat. And you're engaging with your surrounding, right? And if you don't know where you are, and you don't know where the restaurants are, and you don't know where the safe spaces are, you either guess or you try to look at your surroundings and say, I think I'm going to do this, or I think I'm going to go here, right? But you need to understand, wherever you go, that service was going to fluctuate. It's going to be different. The experience might be different. And that's the same thing for a donor, right? A donor says, I want to give $1 million to endow a Black cultural center, right? A few things you need to know before you take that next step, right? First of all, you need to recognize that the rhetoric that colleges and universities use often is supposed to appeal to you, The purpose is to, they want you to give. And so universities will say the things they need to say to get you engaged. I'm not saying that it's not genuine. I'm saying that they need the philanthropic support, perhaps more now than ever. So you need to establish early on what you want to do to support Black students with your finances, right? And that can be for faculty, and that can be for staff endowed chairs and things like that, scholarshiping. And that you want to be very intentional to do that, because you want to responsibly, right, within the parameters of the rules and policy of the universities, but you want your money to work in the way that you want it to work for who you want it to work for, right? And so you have to establish that conversation early on. I'm giving towards Black students. I'm concerned about what's going on in higher ed. I see some blind spots and some problems, and I want to give philanthropically to speak to that. But you need to know who you're benefiting with your generosity. That's really important. You need to get that in writing early on. Doing so builds trust, and it can establish not only a paper trail, but a sense of accountability between the donor and the institution. Right? And then if you can, and this is where you might have to be a little bit wonky, is getting ahead of political trends that might curtail your philanthropic intentions, your philanthropic engagement. So you kind of reading the tea leaves to know that I want to do these things, but these are the legislative and executive orders that are in place at the state level that may make it really hard for me, right? And certain things I can't do anymore. And so I honestly think that Black philanthropists and other philanthropists who are just supporting Black students really should get more into donor advised funds, perhaps establish separate foundations from the institution to give to Black students. And we've had some Black donors who say, hey, we're going to buy space near campus. We're going to buy space near campus for Black students. We can't have a Black cultural center anymore here in Ohio. We're going to buy property. We're going to pool our resources, and we're going to establish that. We're going to find ways that we can still give to Black students. And maybe it's not going to be directly through this intermediary kind of organization like a foundation or an alumni association. And so I think there's got to be some strategy and how to distribute wealth right now. And you need to be really intentional and understanding the capacity and what that could mean for Black communities and Black families.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And I mean, I'm hearing a lot of some of the same, like, similar themes, right? We have to be strategic about this. We have to understand, like, there's an article by Mari Matsuda. It's like, I think she's quoting a song, but it's like, we recognize the waters around you have grown, right? And I think, Dr. Smith, you're saying, hey, we have to be more strategic about this philanthropy donor, like our giving, than ever, right? And we have to be clear about that earlier now too. I want this money to go here, right? And being intentional early on. So here, some of the same things Dr. Graves was saying, being intentional, having these conversations early on, because we have to recognize the terrain has changed, right? And think about strategy. All of you all are talking about how we need to be strategic in this moment. And a lot of this moment, and a lot of this is understanding the context. So given this context, what do we do? How do we flex our agency? How do we inform people about how to make more strategic decisions? How do we give? Where do we give? Right? I like that example you gave about patronage, right? Where do I want, even, I mean, and also in your example, Dr. Smith, and thinking about where do I want to go eat, right? I'm thinking about where do I want my dollars to go, right? A Target is very close. I live super close to a Target, but I'm not going there. So
Right.
where do we want our dollars to go? Thank you for helping us think about some of this. And if there's any work you want to share in the chat, Dr. Smith, I know some of your work about philanthropy is, you've done some of that work on the community colleges, and you're doing some more right now. So I don't know if you want to share anything or put something in the chat. We'd love that. So
thank you. I will do it.
yeah. So I mean, I want to be cognizant of time. And I want to kind of close out with one question in particular for all of these colleagues, since I have you all here. I'm gonna put this in the chat for us. I don't like y'all know me, I'm big on joy, right? I'm just a joyous guy. Anyway, I mean, we talked a lot about, like, the sundown nature of a lot of higher ed right now, right? And we talked about what we could do for resistance. We talked about what how we need to be bold in certain ways too, how we need to be strategic, and I just want to know, like, what gives you all hope? What gives you all hope about the state of Black students in higher education? What gives you all hope about the state of Black students in higher education? Dr. Smith, could you start us off?
Sure. What gives me hope? It's a good question. What gives me hope? Well, I look at the history of Black people in this country.
Mm.
Hundreds of years of chattel slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow laws, mass incarceration of Black minds and bodies, and yet we persist.
Mm.
And if we can do it over the past 400 years or so, we certainly can do it for another 100 years. Now, we shouldn't have to.
Yeah,
that's the important part.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of saying, "Oh, you're so resilient. I'm so proud that you're so resilient." Well, the question is, why do we have to be resilient in the first place? Right?
Yeah.
But my where I have hope is the fact that we do put our minds together. We put all our skills and talents as a community together, and sometimes, you know, we are hard on one another in ways that we shouldn't be.
Mm.
On the college campus and other institutions and organizations.
Yeah.
And we also inspire each other. And so I choose to think about the positive about Black people in this country on these college campuses, the leaders who are leading the conversation and working through the challenges, the faculty and instructors who are spending so much of their time, so much of the hidden labor that's employed, and the staff who work every day with, you know, developing and implementing wraparound services for students, for Black students. And what I'm confident in is that we will persist through this moment. We will persist this. But if we know anything about history, it suggests that we do persist through. So I encourage Black students and faculty and staff, leaders to stay strong, to find ways to insulate yourself when you need to protect yourself, to know where you're going and who you're talking to and what you're writing and what you're putting out in spaces. And when you are taking money, you know, what's the deal if I take this, right? What are the politics? What are the ethical issues, right? If I take this or give this. And I think that if we continue to, you know, appreciate our past, understand our past, I think it will inform how we move in the future. So I'm hopeful in that way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Dr. Raw, let's hear from you. What are you hopeful about?
Well, let me just say I have to remain hopeful. I have 4 Black daughters, and so I am ever hopeful that this world will be a great place, education will be a great place, and they're pretty remarkable. So if nothing else, we got 4 raw girls coming, and they gonna help us out. But my mom always talks about, you know, life is different when your skin has been kissed by the sun, right? And I always resonate on that. But I think a lot of things, and what she says about that is that we have no choice but to succeed, right? Like we've always seasoned things in ways other people. Anything that you put before us, what is that James Brown song? Open up the door and I'll get it, take it myself. I'll get it myself, type of thing. Like just give me the opportunity. We've been able to do that, and so I'm hopeful in that, because oftentimes what's keeping us from doing and having the opportunity is we don't have the opportunity. Open it up and we can do big things. You see what happens. You open up the presidency. We have our first Black president, right? Venus and Serena, tennis, a sport that they never thought they would see us in. We're doing these different things. I think there's so many examples of that. It's just we have to have an opportunity. And so I think it goes back to a lot of what we're talking about, leadership and laws and policies and all these different things. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get back to those things, like the core of higher education, the core of education just in general, and understand how these structures are often built so that people whose skin has been kissed by the sun haven't had these opportunities, right? So I'm hopeful in that. I'm hopeful in that there are people who are doing good work in all different spaces, even though we might not be able to see it on the grand scheme of things, but sometimes it's the one mover or shaker who's doing this one thing and really literally keeping the place open. Like I appreciate what Dr. Briscoe Brown was saying when she's the only one, and I've been that only one, the only Black woman, you know, that sort of thing. But sometimes those people are holding so much up, and that they're doing so much that they could be so much worse. So I think that gives me hope, is knowing that there are people who are moving at the soul of our hearts level on our behalf, and everyone is not resisting, is not succumbing to what's happening. I'm hopeful that we do get more, not just front of the line sort of folks who are pushing back, but we get what Mia Settles Tidwell calls at the table activists, right? Like people who, like Dr. Graves, right? And being a regent before, all these different things, people who are at the table making these decisions, who are able to combat on our behalf, to put forward these things. That gives me hope as I see some of that changing, especially now we're sort of at the time, especially with presidencies and chancellorships, where there's a changing of the guard. So people are going out. And so I would love to see a new wave, what happens with this new wave of leadership. So that gives me hope too. Like hopefully these folks are going to get it together. But I think it's hope because it ain't over, right? Like there's a saying that's like, in the end, it'll be all right. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. And so this idea that we got to keep on keeping on, and that, as Dr. Smith talked about, that we've overcome so much, and we've kept going, right? We've been doing this, right? I think that's so important. In that, what's the alternative, right? When people ask this question a lot in different things, like what gives you hope? And it's just like, how can I not be hopeful? Like, am I just going to quit? Like you can't quit. Like we can't stop. Even if we're making small progress, we're making progress. You have to keep moving. You have to keep resisting, and you have to, right? Like I think about some of my parents, my dad always has said this thing to me, because I've typically always been the only one in my class, always the only one, right? And he always says, you make them as uncomfortable as they try to make you. Right. And what he means by that is you go and be great. Whatever you want to do, you be great, because nothing makes people who don't want you to succeed more comfortable than when you succeed. Like to see a little Black girl go off and do all these things that people told her she would never do. That's what you have to do. And I think that's what we have to do. Is they want us to fail. And so if we do that, we'll give them what they want. We have to continue to resist. We have to continue to do our work, because then they're going to be uncomfortable. They might seem like they're not, but they shaking in their boots because they know we're coming. Like we're not going to stop, and we can't stop. And I think that's really important. So we find our little niche, or whatever we are, for all the people, listening, whether you're faculty, staff, whatever you do, be great in that, and make sure that you're continuing to do the work. Make sure you continue to look out for people who other people are not looking at. And eventually we're going to get to where we need to be. I think that's a really important piece that we don't see. It's like, we're like, oh, woe is me. Like they have all this. Not forever, right? And there are still things that could be happening, moving and shaking in this. So worry about sort of your own area, and then continue to expand that, and continue to build your network, and do more. And how can you do more, and do your part, and let other people do their part. And I think, tomorrow will be better. And whether that tomorrow is actually tomorrow or in 3 years from now, I don't know. But I think it's really important for us to think about that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rawl. Dr. Graves, what gives you hope?
Man, I don't have hope right now following Dr. Rawl, because she did drop the mic, and so it's an honor to follow Dr. Smith and Dr. Rawl. And my answer as I thought about this was, being in spaces like this, this matters so much right now. And I think given the work that we do, sometimes we're in silos, and we're alone working behind a computer as faculty, and you forget that there are folks out here who are about this life, that care, and that we got to find community and be in community. I mean, some of us are in states and at institutions where we can't even name the panels and what this conversation is named. We can't have that name. And so being proactive and being engaged in those spaces matters so much. Knowing that the audience members that are here, I hope they're about that life as well, and that they're here to support Black students and Black families as they navigate higher education. So I think being a part of being in community matters so much now more than ever, because you can feel like you're alone, and it can make it disheartening, discouraging, all those words we talked about in the beginning. But knowing that there's folks out here that care, that they're here to build and network and be a part of the resistance right now, be part of the Green Book as you are putting together Dr. Tichavakunda, I think that matters so much right now. So community matters, and that's what is going to continue to give me hope through these times.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graves. And Dr. Briscoe Brown, why don't you tell us what gives you hope?
I really just think we have to remind ourselves who and whom we are. Like we are the most powerful race that exists. There is no one like Black people. Like I don't mean to crap on nobody else, but I'm gonna give the benediction. There is nobody like Black people that think like us, that have accomplished what we have accomplished, that have outran the test of time from being lynched and murdered and mistreated, right? We are phenomenal. So in this moment, there is nothing about us that we need to rethink other than showing up with our full Black authentic self, knowing that we will withstand this moment. We will absolutely, in every endeavor, outrun what is being held right now. So the only thing that we need to really, really do is have faith, knowing who we are, and we will persist, right? So small plug, voting on local elections matter. Like, we have lots of things coming up. Like, again, the enemy is trying to really deter us from all of these things, deter us from educational spaces, churches, shopping in places, watching things. No, 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 no. When we as a race said, no, we're not gonna deal with Target's BS. See what happened to Target? Because I love a good Target. We don't do Target no more, right? That hurt my soul a little bit. But seriously, all the things started trickling. So I think we also have to understand that, like, our voice, our money has power. So in this moment, just recognize your power, right? Vote, get in front of the issues, understand the issues. Midterm elections coming up. Don't not show up just because it looks the way it looks. Because what's the gospel song? Ain't no need to worry. With the nights, it'll be all right in the morning. It's gonna be all right in the morning. So if they taking away your Black Cultural Center campus, it's gonna be all right in the morning. Your student organization is gonna be all right in the morning. You go get a space in a basement because that's what our people did before these spaces existed on campus. It's gonna be all right in the morning.
Wow. Thank you all so much. I mean, I have more hope just from listening to you all, honestly. And I hope the attendees similarly have more hope. I hope that we have a better understanding of the terrain, the political terrain or milieu. And I also hope that we have more hope, that we feel more motivated moving forward. And I think what Dr. Graves was saying, the importance of community, because we have community. This is community. I think community is perhaps even more important at this moment, right? And what does it mean for us to strategically mobilize together and exert our collective agency, walk in our purpose in our roles and positions, but also still maintaining our livelihoods, right? And work in secret ways, in ways that we can't necessarily broadcast for a very public green book, but ways that supports Black student life. And like I said, this panel is specifically about Black student life, but I think for all marginalized identities, some of these things can be thought with similarly, right? Because as we know, it is not just Black people who are under attack, and this is not to what dilutes the seriousness of anti-Blackness, but understanding that we are in a society, we are in a time where there are a lot of other identities who are being persecuted, who are where they're experiencing a lot of violence. So I hope we all can use the Green Book as an analytic or approach to navigating spaces, understanding that there are issues, there's real societal structural constraints, and also understanding that we have agency. I know we had some questions. I don't think we'll have time for that. I know we wanted to end at 11:15. I want to be respectful of folks' times. Because it is the middle of the day on a Thursday, September 25th. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. If you have follow-up questions, especially for specific faculty, I think you can reach out to their institutional email, or reach out to me, and potentially, we can have further conversations. But I just want to thank everyone for showing up, engaging, all the hearts, the reactions. I know it helps me, and I imagine it helps the other panelists as well. And of course, I want to thank the generous support of the Pullias Center for continuing to sponsor the Alumni Award and make such work and such really important conversations happen. So yeah, a few of the emails are in the chat again, or you can just Google them. A lot of them really high profile scholars. So be sure to look them up.